Hello, good evening. It is Sunday. It is March 6th, 2022, and this is the War Room. And I'm actually starting a minute early. Imagine that. Maybe I should have waited because you guys were checking the schedule, but I got a late start. But I've got the news of the day, and I am happy to report that I will not be eating up 3.5 hours of your time like previous episodes. I don't even think we're going to make a full hour today, to be perfectly honest. And it's not for a lack of trying. It's actually due to... Oh, you know what? I forgot to go back into the room. So, let's try to fix that, shall we? There we go. So hopefully you heard me do that intro. It's Sunday, give me a break. Anyway, there we go. I think I've got everything the way it works now, and I apologize if I borked it just a hair. But anyway, like I started off in the intro, just in case if it didn't come out, it is Sunday. It is the 6th of March. It is the War Room Day 11. There's not a lot of news to share today, actually. Once you take out the opinion stories and the human interest stories and I guess, the repetition of parliamentary members just making pleas, because we know that's going to happen every day until they get what they need or what they want. And the inverse to that is I'm withholding a story today because it was something that I had already known was going to happen all along anyway. But the animosity of the Ukrainian people towards the United States, the EU, and NATO has very much gone or kicked off. There are videos of Ukrainian soldiers and troops and parliament members now. They're screaming at what they perceive as inaction by the EU and by the United States. And I do have a story for you today that sort of plays right into that narrative, but it was towards the EU actually. But I guess the theme of the day now, or this episode today, is contingency plans and preparing for the obvious, I guess. So maybe that's the same thing. But I was a little disturbed by what I read because of what the EU and the US and NATO are planning for already. A little bit shocking. We also have a very blatant case of hypocrisy between the Soviet Union, Russia, and everyone else. What Russia's pulling today, first of all, is going to blow your mind. Second of all, the hypocrisy of it and the inaction of that hypocrisy sort of blows my mind. So anyway, we're going to try to get through this quickly today. As I said before, it does look like I have a full panel today, so I'm going to fix this so I already have the first view laid out. And my first panelist is my compatriot from the Week in Review. So this is Scott P79. He is a tradesman up north of New England. By the way, I saw that our guy in Maine just put out a new video today, so I guess he's okay.
For now.
For now. He does physically look very different, though. Like, you could tell this is kind of taking its toll on him. So, anyway, good evening to you, and I will go ahead and pull in our next panelist, which is our IT guy, and this is Mikhail Nightstritsky, also known as Nightstrike, and he hosts Hit or Miss Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock, and then usually somewhere between the mid to the end of the week, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes even Sunday, when I don't hold him hostage doing this, he'll host that day's night strike. So like Friday night strike or Saturday night strike, depending on...
I'm going to try and get that done again. It's just lately things haven't lined up, so...
I understand. I mean, you guys have been
I'm not going to blame you. I'm not going to blame you. It's just, not everything's lined up, and I've had birthdays and family issues. Like my great uncle had surgery today, so, and I didn't even know he was sick. So
Surprise, right?
yeah, shit like that's happening.
Well, I mean,
Same shit, different day.
you guys have been stellar just being here for this every day. Like when I started doing this, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know if I was going to do it once a week, once a day, every day, that kind of thing. And it just sort of turned out like this. And I'm kind of glad it did because it's keeping me on my toes. It's definitely doing things to me physically, like sleep and all that, but I'm getting used
Huh.
to it. It's like,
Sleep?
yeah,
What's that?
I
I
don't
I
know.
tried that last night, but without any power, no AC. Yeah, no.
So, okay, let me give you guys a little bit of insight to that. After yesterday's show, we typically drop back into the green room for some of the folks who were in the audience who just want to talk. So that happened, and I didn't get to go to bed till almost 6 a.m. I wanted to go to bed. I wanted to get something to eat right after the show, so I ran out to the kitchen, poured a big bowl of Fruit Loops, sat down, and it was like I couldn't get away from the conversation. So that bowl of Fruit Loops got ruined. So I'm like chastising Patrick, and then I go run back to the kitchen, dump it out, pour another bowl of Fruit Loops, sit down, and he ruins that one too. And I was just like, fuck it. I ain't eating Fruit Loops. So then he kept me up for another 2.5 hours past that. And like my throat almost felt like I had just done like a max out workout at the gym. Like it was just sore and burning. I was just like, to hell with this. So I threw in
Well,
the towel at like
w-
5 something.
welcome to hosting the show by yourself.
Gah. All right. So anyway, let me pull in my final panelist because
Ask Tony about that one.
he's floundering
Yeah.
around looking for us, and this is the Polish Hammer, our Polish compatriot, which I think he's going to find today's splash screen of the show on the replay quite entertaining, actually, and very fitting. Uh, so yeah, welcome to Warsaw Patriot.
What's up? And also, by the way, there's
Mm.
nothing makes me more happier than seeing Russians getting their asses handed to them.
Well,
Ain't that the
yes. It's just the only bad thing is they're not exactly.
Not enough.
Today. Not today. Here, let me drag this over here to get our avatars a little more cleanly put out here. So we're going to be slightly cut off, but it's cool. So the background you're looking at is actually the caption and picture to our first story today. But before I get into that, let me clean this up a little bit. Sorry. I kind of did this one in a hurry. So good evening to you out in the viewing audience. I see Shady Hill. Generally, people start filing in later because I am horrible about setting up the schedule until like 10 minutes before kickoff, so my apologies.
He's
So-
awful about it, kids.
So anyway, like I said, there's not a lot of stories to work with today. I took out all the emo stuff, and I'm trying to just keep it factual, like just actual events today. And our first story is the caption of today's show. So this came in at just about 1 a.m. Before we ended the last, or right after we ended the last show. Wow, I've got a Mad Sexy out in the audience for once. So good evening.
All right.
Yeah.
I miss Mad Sexy.
Yeah. All right.
He's
So
a great guy.
our first story comes out to you from 12:52 a.m. my time. So I'm in Central Standard Time because I live in Texas, and this would have been breakfast time in Ukraine, 8:52 a.m. And it's pretty interesting actually because I had to ask how this was going to work. And Patrick was pretty helpful with that. Scott was pretty good at corroborating it, and then I started digging into it, and sure as shit, looks like it's what's going to happen. So, the United States is considering a deal with Poland to send U.S. warplanes, ours, to Warsaw to replace all of their Soviet-era MiG-29s. So, I think we might have touched on this yesterday, slightly. But the way it's going to work is, we had sent troops, we sent 7,000 troops out of Georgia about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago in preparation for this. And what we did is we backfilled. So our doctrine right now with NATO is I think we're trying to make them take the lead on something and then we backfill instead of us just pushing everyone out the way, saying, "Get out of the way. We'll handle this." Right? We have a history and a reputation of doing that when we decide to get involved. So this time, I almost like the way we're doing this, because what we ended up doing is we got Germany to commit 20,000 troops, and they pushed them into Slovakia, which does border Ukraine, right? Or very closely. Okay.
It's right next to them.
Okay. So yeah, they backfill, or they went in to Slovakia, and then the United States backfilled 7,000 troops into Germany. So home guard, I guess, right? Well, we're doing the same thing here uh, with fighter aircraft, because Ukraine has been, seeking out assistance in any way or means possible. And their air force right now is very decentralized. And they're probably low on aircraft and munitions for said aircraft. And if you want to donate aircraft to another nation, you definitely don't want to send them aircraft they're not familiar with, because it's not going to do them any good. They have to have like masters of arms, right? So thankfully, they use the same jets that Poland is using, the MiG-29. So what they're doing is Poland is working out a deal with us where they send their MiG-29s to the Ukraine, and then the United States backfills with shiny new production F-16s. And I wasn't sure about that, but like Scott and Patrick last night, they were like, "Oh yeah, dude, we're still making those." He was like, "Oh yeah, we're building those," and I'm like, "Great." So that's good news, right? The Polish Air Force gets shiny new F-16s, and the Ukraine gets the plane that they're familiar with. I mean, okay, you can argue they're hand-me-downs, but you know what? They need something they can just jump in and go. And
It's true.
if you look at the way Poland builds AKs, they don't cut corners, which means they're probably very good at building them, and they're very good at maintaining them. So they're not really hand-me-downs. They're very well maintained, weapons of war.
Now here's a question: how do they get their planes overseas? From the United States to Poland, would they have to do it from a ship or from by airplane?
No, they could ferry them over.
Well, okay, I read a story a few days ago that the Harry S. Truman ended up in the Med. And I think if we were to send planes over, it's possible that the Truman has them, or we're just going to send another carrier full of them.
I think carrier.
The ones we have are not carrier capable.
Okay, so they're not Navy planes.
No, the MiG-29s that were carrier capable.
No. We're giving
modified.
Poland.
I'm talking about the
F-16s.
F-16s.
Oh, F-16s are not carrier capable.
Okay, so
That's an Air Force only strictly thing. They could carry them and pull into a port and offload them by crane.
So we're talking like air
they don't
cargo.
have the means to be catapulted off, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, that's
they
fine.
They could doolittle them. They could, load them on the carrier, but then the carrier can't launch any aircraft.
That might be fine too, though, because you can put a lot of F-16s on a carrier, and then just, like you said, crane them off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to take extra time, but it's still going to get done. So, yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm sure they'll figure that out. Mad Sexy was asking if we still build F-16s, and the answer is yes. And I want to say they build them in your state?
Yeah, Pakistan's a customer on those.
Don't they build them in your state?
I don't think so.
South Carolina? Yeah.
That's where they're built, right? Like, I think Patrick even mentioned that. One of the Carolinas builds them. But yeah, they build them on contract for
Washington.
They build them on contract for other
yeah,
military.
Apparently, yeah, they're built here they're built in Suchestown.
There you go.
Greenville.
Nice. There you go.
Before the F-16, I kind of liked the Tomcat. That thing was nice.
Those I don't think are made anymore.
Nope.
No, those have all been destroyed.
Yeah. Well, supposedly.
You deny Iran any spare
wink. Super hard wink. All right, so let's move on, because we all have things to do on a Sunday, right? And there ain't that many stories, so. All right, so fast forward. I'm deep into chewing out Patrick for many things, but chief among which, ruining my second bowl of Fruit Loops.
Like a new asshole.
Yeah.
And is this FYI, this isn't a Sunday, this is a Monday. Is it?
Well, over there it is, yes.
Wait, today's a Sunday.
Yes. I mean, it just depends on where you are, but do we still use the F-18? I think we still use Super Hornets, right?
F-18s?
Yeah. Navy uses them.
Scott, help me out here.
muted. I think we use Super Hornets. I think we do. Don't quote me on it, though. Anyway, let's move on. About 3 hours and... So, yeah, 3:53 a.m. my time. Or second ruined bowl of Fruit Loops. 11:53, so it's just about lunchtime over in the Ukraine. And remember, Blinken is still in the region, right? So U.S. Secretary of State... Oh, I got to put the picture up. Sorry. My mistake. Bing! There you go. And yes, it's a hypothetical question that I put as a caption. But... Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in Moldova on Sunday, where he was scheduled to meet with Moldovan leaders dealing with the arrival of more than 120,000 refugees from neighboring Ukraine. In all, more than 230,000 Ukrainians had crossed into Moldova since the Russian invasion began 11 days ago. The Associated Press, that's just the Associated Press reported it. Moldova was also seeking security assurances from the West as it dealt with its own fears of a Russian invasion. Russia already has troops inside the country, though, because 9,000 of them stepped off into Ukraine on the first day of this incursion. Now, Moldova claims they had, their arm twisted behind their back, and, there was nothing they could do about it. They're one of the poorest countries of the region. They really didn't want to, kick a hornet's nest, so they were just like, look, just do what you gotta do and get the hell out of our country. Really, I mean, that's kind of the way they did it on a diplomatic front, because as soon as the Russians had stepped off, they immediately contacted the Ukraine and said, look, we know what just happened and it looks bad from our side, but we will very gladly take your refugees because the Russians are gone. So they thought.
Wait, so is Moldova's basically turning a leaf, basically, against Russia?
Well, I don't think they were really on board with it in the first place. You know what I mean? It was sort of like Russia was like, do this or else.
So they kind of were pulled in?
Yeah, they were sort of like held hostage, basically. They couldn't afford to defend themselves, right? They're a pretty poor country. Almost a quarter of their population had a mass exodus over the last couple of years because of the job and the economy market, the economy and the jobs market in their country. They lost almost 25% of their total population to it. They just left. So there's a huge void to fill for employment. And a couple of days ago, we covered this story about how Ukrainian refugees were welcomed into Moldova. They were given work visas. They had like 5,000 IT jobs immediately available. They completely just fast-tracked all the children so they can go to public schools and everything. They were so happy these people came in. They were like, look, we're sorry about your country, but you are welcome to be one of us. As long as you need to be. We have jobs, we have buildings, we have everything you need. Just come on in. So it's like, I think their true colors shown itself as a humanitarian effort after their hostage situation by Russia ended, more or less. Like, they really didn't have a dog in that fight. But they're making good on the humanitarian front, for sure.
Well, that's something at least, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, so, like, this is a picture from that meeting in Moldova, and my only question is, didn't anybody get the fucking memo? Like, Monday night, COVID ended. It was over. Like, how come nobody's remembering that? I mean, think about it. The day before the State of the Union address, right? They declared COVID over. It was over. Like, nobody wanted to wear masks in Washington, so Brandon can go do a State of the Union speech without the mask on. Because apparently it gets in front of his eyes and he can't read the teleprompter. Or maybe the earpieces keep yanking out the earpiece of his puppet master in his head telling him what to say. Whatever. Regardless, no more masks. COVID was over. I mean, all of a sudden, like, the trucker strike had ended too. And nobody remembered what happened in Canada. And just pick your thing that was fucking the world for the last year. And it just disappeared. Yeah, it just disappeared on Monday. It was like gone. Anyway, apparently in Moldova they didn't get that memo, and they're all wearing masks like stupid little ninjas. Let's move on.
Get over it, Sean.
I can't.
Get over it.
I can't. I just can't.
Oh, I've got an announcement.
Go ahead.
The Russians are kind of fucked now.
Well,
so
because the Israelis have showed up.
Yes.
Holy shit!
I've got that in here. I think it's part of the
Oh.
stories.
Whoa,
Yeah.
are we talking to Mossad, or are we talking the whole entire Israeli
We're
military?
talking veterans that willingly came on their own.
Oh,
Holy shit.
wait, save it to the end then if that was a latest breaking update thing, because that's going to be good.
This is a breaking thing.
Okay, keep it to the end because
When you
we're
destroy
almost...
a Holocaust memorial, that would get the
That does
the
piss a
Israelis
few people
pissed
off.
off.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
piss a few people off,
It,
sure.
it pisses off not only the Israeli army, the military, the government. It also pisses off the Mossad,
Yes,
and you don't want to piss
sir.
off the Mossad.
All right, so let's get through these quickly because I want to hear this too, because I have a story that I'm not saying it's going to contradict what you're saying. It works
compliment.
against what... No, it works against what he's saying. Like what he's saying is a good thing. What I'm going to tell you is a terrible thing. So like maybe the two will cancel each other out, which would be great. Like awesome.
Let's
All
hear it.
So 5 minutes later, it's still just about lunchtime, and let me get the picture up for you. Bing. All right. Undaunted by the presence of Russian troops in their cities, as many as 2,000 residents of Kherson, Ukraine, took to the streets in a show of defiance and national unity. Russians go home and Kherson is Ukraine were among the shouted slogans. Oh, all right. Later, Mad Sexy. You can always catch us on the replay.
Bye, Mad Sexy.
Kherson, located in southern Ukraine along the Black Sea, fell to the Russians last week, with the city's mayor estimating that as many 300 people were killed. I think I said that right. With many of the bodies rendered unrecognizable because of the power of the invaders' weapons, like missile strikes and mortars and cluster munitions and dushkas, essentially. So what I'm looking at here is a very large wall of defiance. And what could have happened here could have been a massacre. So I don't like giving them credit, but you kind of have to give the Russian military at that protest kind of a nod for not just slaughtering them wholesale. You know what I mean?
Did they arrest them?
I'm sure they did. Or they clubbed them or whatever, but I mean, you didn't hear about anyone getting killed from this. So,
It's not the Russians unless they clubbed someone or
Gassed
arrest them
them.
during a riot.
yeah, maybe they very quietly gassed them or something, and like they
Yeah.
don't know that they're sick yet or something. I don't know.
Some tear gas or
Let's
something.
try to stay positive, I guess.
Okay. we'll try.
It's Russia.
Right. All right.
It's Russia.
So you're back feeding a little bit, Warsaw.
Huh?
You're back feeding a little bit.
Oh.
Like, I don't know if your mic is picking up from your speakers or whatnot. So 3:59, which is still just before noon over there. But the reason I put this one in here is because the story must have started earlier, and it was just published at 3:59 a.m., which would have been a minute to 5 a.m. on the East Coast, D.C. It says, Biden cozies up with former sanctioned enemies. Now, that's a pretty powerful headline. Several senior Biden administration officials from the White House and State Department traveled to Venezuela to meet with the Russian ally as Moscow's economy begins to crater under the weight of sanctions. So, yeah, Venezuela's an ally to Russia, right?
Last time I checked, it's a communist country.
Yeah. The U.S.
If we
is
want,
hoping...
AK-12s, we can invade their country.
Yeah, that's true.
Wow. So the U.S. is hoping to capitalize on Russia's economic weakness 3 years after the Kremlin, along with China and Iran, came to Venezuela's financial aid when the Trump administration had cut all diplomatic ties with Caracas and imposed sanctions on oil exports in the Latin American country amid Western accusations of an illegitimate election, citing sources familiar with the matter. Most of Venezuela's oil exports had gone to the U.S. before said sanctions. What this means is Biden shut down the Keystone, and within 2 or 3 days of his first day in office, 100,000 people lost their jobs in the energy and logistics and the trucking industries overnight, right? So we went from energy independent to energy codependent to energy absolutely dependent on all the nations that we wanted to stop funding to drive either terroristic wars or commie uprisings. And now we're going to buy oil from them again. We're going to put money in Venezuela's pockets for the oil that we could just make ourselves domestically. And where do you think that money's going to go? It's either going to fund whatever's happening in Venezuela, or it's just going to be fenced over to Russia anyway, isn't it?
You
They're
know,
allies.
I'm not one to promote violence, but somebody should really kick him down a flight of stairs.
Yeah, but the White
Well,
House
that's
is
why
only
they
Especially
two
make
on-
stories.
Bella walk in front of him.
The White House is only 2 stories, though.
Hey, he's proven that he can't climb stairs.
Yeah. Well, those are airplane stairs.
Hey, Night Strike, it's funny you say that. If it's stairs, what about a escalator?
Oh God, let's not even get there.
It wouldn't surprise me if he had the little motorized chair installed for him.
Oh, the Stanner stair lift.
Yeah.
Dude, if I ever walked into a place that had one of those, I'd ride it too. Just lazy. Anyway, moving on. 7 a.m. So I've only had an hour's worth of sleep, and I woke up to this stupid RSS feed pinging away in my ear. It is now 1 p.m. in Ukraine, so they just had lunch, which is probably MREs. But at least the
But
Ukrainians...
Ukrainian MREs are pretty good.
Yeah,
you
they're
video,
really
right?
good, and they didn't expire in 2015, so
No, they
awesome.
didn't.
That's super awesome. So anyway, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees announced Sunday, this is a pretty sobering statistic, by the way, that the number of Ukrainians fleeing to neighboring countries has already surpassed 1.5 million in 11 days. Filippo Grandi tweeted Sunday that this constitutes the fastest growing refugee crisis since World War II, a fact that he has continued to press over and over during the last week as the numbers continued to climb and multiply at an alarming rate. Refugees have fled to the neighboring countries of Poland, Moldova, Lithuania, Romania, and a few others. But in all reality, Poland has taken the lion's share of refugees. Their numbers today just went past 982,000. So if we were to give any financial aid to any country that's handling this, it should go to Ukraine first for what they immediately need, and everything else should just go to Poland, like immediately, because they're handling like 90% of the work. So that's just opinion, but I think it makes sense, right? You do all the work, you get all the money. It just makes sense to me.
And I mean, then again, Poland and Ukraine have a serious bond and friendship because they've kind of suffered the same way as they have.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is like one people in 2 countries for sure. At least when it comes to like history. So, also, this is now just on the Ukrainian time, so it's 1 p.m. Ukrainian time. Russia and Ukraine once again accused each other yeah, of failing to maintain the humanitarian corridor Sunday. Hang on, I gotta fix your volume just a little bit. You back feed just a hair. Alright, I think that fixed it.
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Oh well, we'll press on, it's fine. Sorry if you guys hear it in the audience, that little kind of wah 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 in the background, but it's
Wah,
It's
wah,
fine.
wah, 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 wah.
yeah. Anyway, so they're both throwing daggers at each other, accusations, because that's what warring nations do, right? And they're both blaming each other for failing to maintain the agreed upon humanitarian corridor for the 2nd day in a row. So Russian news agency Interfax cited a Donetsk separatist official who accused Ukrainian forces of not upholding the temporary ceasefire. Ukrainian National Guard members said that pro-Russian forces encircled the port and continued to shell the area. The separatist official said that about 300 people of a planned 200,000 were the only ones to evacuate the area. The two countries had agreed on temporary ceasefire Saturday to allow civilians to escape the city of Mariupol, but Ukrainian officials accused Russia of continuing to assault the city during that time. Russia then in turn blamed Ukrainian nationalists for instigating all the fighting. Sure. Alright, let's move on. Okay, so this next one's going to be a map for you. It's kind of like, I just sort of paraphrased the Russian advance, so you can kind of get an idea of the scope of what they're doing and how they're doing it, because you have Vladimir Putin basically announcing that everything's going to plan. And if this was his plan, you got to hand it to the guy. It was pretty good, tactically speaking, or geographically speaking. So here's the picture. I drew these in here for you. Basically, the stars I put in there were like the major battles. And I probably should have put the dates they happened, but you can get a pretty good idea. And then, like, the arrows are obviously the troop advancements. And the most important one is obviously Kyiv and Odessa, because they're surrounding Kyiv on two sides. And I had thought they were waiting for the southern contingent to link up, but it's become pretty obvious just by looking at how they're pushing this, how this is going to go. So let's go ahead and get into that. 4 p.m. Ukraine time. It's an hour before the curfew. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Wednesday that Russian forces have bombed the town of Vinnytsia, which is... It's where the pin is on the far left, southwest of Kyiv. It's where I started the arrow pushing up, on the top left corner there. He described the town as peaceful and appealed to the West to do more to help Ukraine push back the Russian forces. Provide us with at least jets so we can hit Russian missiles, he said in his video. If we will not receive help now, I will be convinced that the West is also interested in the elimination of Ukrainians. That is exactly what I've been talking about for a week now.
Yep.
This is the point. This is the climax of this war, where if Ukraine gets overrun, there will be scores of executions in town centers of their leadership to set an example and bring to heel the people through terror, right? And what they will do is they will make a spectacle of this public execution, and they will say, "Where is your Western saviors now? Look how they left you abandoned to us. At least we will feed you when this is over if you go our way." And they will win the propaganda war. And Ukrainians that aren't freedom fighters and liberators will probably just fall in line because they have children that they couldn't get out, and they have mouths to feed, and they're sick and tired of their buildings getting destroyed. And they'll just be like, fuck it. They just want to say that we're them, and they're going to leave me alone and let me have my house back and go back to work, and I don't have to worry about their missiles hitting the buildings in the middle of the night. A lot of those guys and women and children will just fall in line, because you have to look at the way that this conflict played out. This country was split in thirds. There was pro-Russian separatists. There was
The Crimeans.
basically those who said that they will fight to the death. So they're like the patriots. And then there was about a third of the population who was just like, whatever you do, just get it over with so we can go back to work. They were very indifferent until their family members started getting killed. Then they would start falling one side or the other. The fence-sitter population was the one that was going to easily be swayed one way or another. But imagine if they take over the Ukraine. Imagine if Zelensky is captured or killed, or the Klitschkos, or Lomachenko, or Usyk. Like, these athletes and world leaders. Scott even sent me a picture in a story last night when we ended the show one of the cross-country skiers that participated in the Winter Olympics has been killed fighting for that country yesterday. So their icons are coming down. And the Russians are just going to be like, where is your Western savior now? Where is your UN? Where is the US? Where's your NATO now? And I hate to say it, but I've got a story coming up that's going to reinforce that. And it's going to make you sick. Because basically what's going on is world leaders are still scared of the boogeyman. And the boogeyman is the Soviet Union's reputation, 1961.
Which the Russian Federation has no claim to.
Right. They're not that anymore. But they're riding the coattails of their reputation because that's all they've got. That and nukes. And apparently, that's all you need to bring the Western civilized world to heel. You know, we talked about this last night. If there was 20 million Russians and you killed 19,999,999 and there was one Russian left hiding in the mountains of the Urals and he had his finger on the button, the UN would still stand down. The threat of the man with the button will negate everything and anything else. And this is proof of it. This is Exhibit A. And I've got, even though there wasn't many stories, there's a lot of lessons I'm going to teach you today. Because there's another one at the end of this show that's going to pretty much draw this and put a fine little point on it. So let's go ahead and get through the rest of these stories, and I will try to put the sociology behind all of this. Okay. 9:28 a.m., which is now 5:30 Ukrainian time. So curfew is now in effect. People in the city streets are told to lock down, stay indoors, lock everything, you know, probably keep your lights off, try not to attract any attention to anyone passing by on the streets, especially a Russian soldier that's either hungry or horny. Because there are stories, there are fucking stories. The soldiers are already kicking down doors and taking all the food and raping women, so that's just part of war. It's in every war. It's a sick part of war, but it is what it is. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Foreign Affairs Minister Dmytro Kuleba reported Sunday that Russian forces attacked a civilian airport with 8 cruise missiles. I think I forgot to put the picture up for this. Yeah, I did. Sorry. Let me see if I have it. It's not a big deal. Basically, it was the front of the airport, and you can see that the whole back of it was just covered in, like, fire and smoke. So, anyway, against our city, against our peaceful Venezia, which never posed a threat to Russia in any way, Zelensky said in a video posted on Twitter. A brutal and cynical missile strike has completely destroyed the airport. Kuleba labeled the attack as barbaric, and both officials renewed their calls for a no-fly zone over Ukraine, obviously. The Russian embassy in Israel pushed back on the reports by writing that the airport is, quote, dual purpose and serves as a base of operations for the aviation brigade of the Ukrainian armed forces. So what they're doing is they're telling you that the reason that they're hitting civilian targets is because any civilian who arms himself and attacks a Russian soldier is now a combatant. And yes, in the rules of war, that makes sense. However, they're blowing up the buildings preemptively and assuming that everyone in Ukraine is a belligerent and militant attacker. So they're just saying, well, we took out the building because they're probably in there. That's how they're fighting this war. And they're taking out these airports, and they're saying, well, it's a civilian airport, but it also has Ukrainian armed forces landing there. Well, yeah, because you blew up their base. But by the rules of war, technically they'd be correct, wouldn't they? If you put military hardware in a certain place, that is now a military installation. That's the Russian line of thinking. They're playing a very cold and calculated game of pointing out the rules. I mean, they're bending the shit out of them. They're like the ATF right now. But what are you going to do? No one's stopping them. No one's calling them out on it. So they're going to just keep doing it. And they're going to get emboldened by it. They're going to learn from this. And this lesson will be in Russian combat freaking manuals for the next generation of soldier to read and go, oh, yeah, I guess we can do that. They did it back in 2022. And apparently the UN and NATO don't have their balls anymore, so they just let us do it. Because our guy has a button. I'm telling you. It's in there. So, now we are at 10:32 a.m. my time. And I forgot to translate the time over to China, Beijing time. But China's agricultural minister reported over the weekend that the recent winter wheat harvest could be the worst in history, providing
good.
it gets better. Providing further justification for them to buy from Russia.
Oh, is that what that is?
They're fencing money in because think about
Mm.
this. When China gets hit with polar winter storms, they come through Russia. Meaning, if the winter was bad enough to ruin your crops in China, which is further south than these parts of Russia where these fronts come from, then their crops are ruined as well. Unless they're doing it on the other end of the continent, which that's feasible. But it's all a front. They're just doing it to fence the money over, clearly. Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs Tang Renjian, said rare heavy rainfall last year delayed the planting of about 1/3 of the normal wheat supply, leading to roughly 20% shortage in crop yield. The war between Russia and Ukraine, which together produce roughly 29% of all global wheat exports, had already pushed wheat prices to a 14-year high. The shortage could create food security issues for China, driving it to buy wheat from Russia. The two countries worked out a deal on the 24th of February that allowed China to import wheat from all regions of Russia, which could provide Russia with greater funds for its war. Gee, I guess I put the cart before the horse. They said the same thing. It'll provide Russia with greater funds for its war and further relief from devastating sanctions on its economy. What it's not telling you in this story is China will simply just say, well, look, they're trying to help us with wheat. We can't get enough, so we're going to go take over Taiwan because they have wheat fields. We're going to go take over Jakarta and Indonesia and Siam. They're gonna start to justify their needs based off of their shortages, their needs to push into other countries. Bet, like I'm putting that out there right now. I'll bet on it. It's just the part that you're not supposed to know. That's the quiet part. Eventually, journalists will say it out loud. I give it 3 to 6 months. Okay, let's move forward. 11:33 my time, still not lunchtime. The national average for regular unleaded gas officially crossed the $4 per gallon mark nationwide for only the second time ever, and sits just 10 cents from the all-time record high seen in July 2008. July 2008 was the peak of the oil speculator market boom of crude oil. All right, night, Warsaw. So, little history lesson for those of you who have short-term memories, or maybe it's rare, but maybe you're too young to remember that part. Maybe you weren't of driving age back then. Maybe this is normal to you, what you're seeing. Not for me. When I graduated high school, gas was 79 cents a gallon. And that was in 1997. It wasn't really that long ago. Now, granted, before it hit 79 cents a gallon, it used to float somewhere between like $1 and $1.50. Just to put that into perspective, we had this one spot of like really good oil prices, and I had 79 cents, and I was like, oh, so this is what it must have been like when my dad was growing up in the 70s to do this. Anyway,
and then it fluctuated.
And then oil prices stayed respectable for years, and people drove more because gas was cheap, at least in the United States. So giantism became a thing around the same time as the U.S. automakers like retro mark Renaissance. You know, like when the Chevy HHR came out to look like a panel wagon, and like the SSR truck was supposed to sort of look like a 1950 Chevy truck, but then they did this stupid convertible top thing. That whole revolution, the Mini Cooper came back, the Fiat 500 came back, my Thunderbird came back, the Mustang went retro again. You know that whole thing. Um, well, yeah, you did pay 49 cents pre gas crisis. That's true. So anyway, around the same time, giantism was becoming a thing too. Trucks got bigger. The Ford came out with the V10 Triton engine. The Dodge Viper went 8-liter with the V10. You know, giantism was the thing. There was like a race for massive horsepower. I mean, like I'm going to use my graduation as an example, right? In 1997, if you had a car that produced a factory vehicle that produced 400 horsepower, you were pretty, up there. And then only what, 5 or 6 years later, it went 7, 8, 900 horsepower, and then the Veyron came out and just smashed everything, right?
Right.
Now, if you don't make 1,000 horsepower out of an LS, you're an amateur, because it's not hard to do, essentially, right? But anyway, giantism is the thing. Ford wanted to build something bigger than the Explorer, so then they made the Expedition. And then people were like, "Oh, cool! You built an SUV out of an F-150 instead of out of a Ford Ranger. Wouldn't it be cool if you made a bigger SUV out of the Super Duty Ford with the 7.3-liter Power Stroke and make it four-wheel drive, so we can put 12-inch lifts and 44-inch tires on it?" Or or am I the only one who thinks that? So anyway, Ford looked at those people and said, "Yeah, let's do that." So then the Excursion was born.
Oh boy, I missed the Excursion.
And the Excursion only came with 2 engines, maybe 3. I think maybe 3. You could have got it with the 7.3, which is the one you wanted. You could have got it with the V10, which
Not the one you wanted.
I don't know. It's not a bad engine. It's just it was the answer to a question nobody asked. And then I think you could get it with the V8, and I want to say it was. I don't think it was the 5.4, but if it was the 5.4 Triton, that's the one you didn't want. Not in an Excursion.
Yeah.
Because that was single-digit miles per gallon. Anyway, The Simpsons made fun of it. They called it, they did the Canyonero episodes back then. And what happened? Life was good. And then all of a sudden, greedy little grubby imps, known as oil speculators, started driving up the prices of oil per barrel. And they started, hyperinflating the price of oil. And they were driving a narrative about Middle Eastern, discontent and
Sean?
What?
The V8 and the V10 were Tritons.
I know.
Yeah.
That was just the name of the line.
They also had 2 V8 Power Strokes, which like a 7.3 and a 6.
Yeah, the early ones came with the 7.3, which is the one you wanted, and then the one that followed it was the 6-liter, which was mechanical hot garbage.
Yeah, it still worked. It's better than nothing.
They broke a lot. Let me put it to you this way: the 6-liter Power Stroke was so bad that they made another one later, which was I think the 6.2, and the 6.2 still had a bunch of problems, and now the current ones are 6.7s, and those are okay. They're okay. They're still not as good as the 7.3. Like my neighbor across the street, he works on like diesel and heavy equipment like bulldozers and backhoes and earth movers and everything, right? When he bought his truck, he could have bought a 6.7 Power Stroke. He didn't. He went and bought a 7.3. And I'm like, you bought a 10-year-old truck? He's like, actually, I bought a 16-year-old truck. And I looked at him, I'm like, are you crazy? And he says, nope, this will still outlast the 6.7. He's like, it'll absolutely outlast the 6.0 and the 6.2. But anyway, let's not get into that. That's mechanical stuff.
Yeah, I know.
I could talk about it for days, but I mean, most of these guys, not so much. So anyway,
I can talk about it too.
So the speculator market drove up the price of oil all the way up to $150 a barrel at its height. $150. And gas prices?
49 cents.
I know. I already addressed it, but It was $150 a barrel back in 2008. And gas prices were then what they are now for us at oil at $115 a barrel. How's that math check out?
You know, I just want to mention this. Back
Sure.
when Trump was president, it was like $1.99.
Oh,
Recent.
yeah, you've heard me say this. The day before the election, 2020, my T-Bird was running on fumes. It only holds like 16 and a half gallons or so, right?
Yeah.
But it runs on 93 only.
Octane.
It knocks like crazy if you put the cheap shit in.
Oh,
So
I use it all the time.
so I went to my local and I filled the tank the day before the election, and I sat there and I heard the little auto thing cut off after a couple minutes, and I looked over and it was $17
Yeah.
because I was able to buy premium with my fuel card discount, 93 octane,
Mm-hmm.
91 cents a gallon. The day before the election, I was like, man, life is good.
Then Biden got elected and
Then that asshole stole an election and shut down the Keystone. And 2 days ago, I went to fill the tank. Same tank, same car, same grade of fuel, same pump even that I normally go to. $71. Reciprocal
Yeah.
of what I spent at the last election. I was like, let's go, Brandon.
Yeah, I had to fill my whole tank the other day. It was like $55, and there was a picture of Joe Biden sticker
Yeah,
on my
I
pump.
did this. I
on
did
my
that.
pump saying I did that, and
Yeah.
I'm like, you motherfucker.
I think Angelina actually prints those. I think I remember her saying something like that on her Instagram.
I swear to God, somebody made it their mission to post that
Mhm.
all over
Oh, yeah.
the gas pumps in my entire state because I can't go to a gas station
Mhm.
without seeing it there.
Well, because people are fed up. But I mean, I guess my
Well,
point
then they
is,
should have voted properly instead of being wusses.
well, my point is if you take the oil prices of 2008 at $150 a barrel and gas prices today, gas prices then, and adjust both for inflation to 2022 standards, that price per barrel then is now $189 to make gas prices today, if you adjusted for inflation, $6.29 a gallon. So it's like, wait a minute, how did you make gas prices right now the same as 2008 when the oil prices are $35 a less a barrel? How the fuck did that work? Nobody asks that question in the media, and nobody can give me the answer. So if you can give me the answer, leave it in the comments below, because I would love to know the answer, and I will gladly credit you for it and share it on air, because that I need to know that answer. And I think most of you want to know that answer. All right, enough of that tangent. I told you this was going to be a quick show, and we're already an hour in. So anyway, the nationwide average currently sits at $4.09 of a cent. Because if you go and look at the pumps, it always says 1.99 and 9/10 of a cent, because they're shitlords that are lying to you. According to AAA gas prices, up roughly 9 cents a gallon over Saturday's average. So in 24 hours, it went up 9 cents. The price had risen 47 cents in 11 days since Ukraine was invaded by Russia. Premium gas, the stuff I have to buy, costs an average of $4.57, which is up 10 cents just from yesterday. The record high for regular unleaded was $4.11 and 4/10 in 2008. Riots, dude. Like, we have something called the strategic oil reserves, right? It's not for the president to open up and give to us, because 30
not as
million
big a
barrels, like, you have to look at the strategic oil reserves. They have a couple, maybe 100 million, maybe 250 million barrels of oil in there. That's not for us, because the United States consumes 18.2 million barrels of oil a day. The 330 something million people of this country, if you factor in all the energy usage, like I think it's like 18.2 million barrels a day. Okay, so the strategic oil reserves was not meant to maintain the populace. It was meant to maintain the military, which they probably factored at the most was 2 to 3 million active, right? And the Navy's nuclear, so you don't have to worry about subs, and you don't have to worry about carriers. You don't have to worry about. Are destroyers nuclear, or are
No.
they still turbine?
They're turbine.
Okay, so maybe them, and then obviously the
Carriers and-
aircraft, and
Carriers
obviously
Carriers and subs are the only nuclear powered.
Yeah,
Okay.
carriers and subs are the only nuclear.
okay, so the cruisers, the destroyers, corvettes, if we still use corvettes, LCTs, all those. Okay, that's what the
I'm
oil.
sure we still use
That's what the
corvettes.
strategic reserve is for. The ground troops, the tanks, the paladins, that's what the oil is for. It wasn't meant for us, right? If we know that that's why it's called the strategic oil reserves, that means oil is part of the national defense of this country. It's that important. And if you have a president who has undermined domestic oil production to the point where he is bankrupting the American people and collapsing his own economy, that has to be an impeachable offense. He is making us globally vulnerable militarily because now he's tapping into the oil reserves that was reserved for them in the name
Yeah,
of
but
trying to
presidents
look
have
good.
done that before.
Here's the fucked up part, though. Every time a president has touched the national oil reserves to try to stymie oil prices jump up in response. It doesn't go down because the market's not stupid. They look at that and go, 30 million gallons is 31 hours worth of oil in this country. Are you fucking stupid? Are you insulting us? We're not dumb. We can do the math. Apparently, Brandon can't do the math. Maybe his arthritic fingers can't count that high. Whatever.
No, he's too busy falling upstairs.
Falling up. Yes. Maybe they had oil on them.
Ooh.
All right, let's move on. 7:33 p.m. Moscow time. So it's still not my lunchtime. It's only 11:33 my time. A Russian defense ministry here. This is where the shit starts to get pretty hypocritical. A Russian defense ministry spokesman said Sunday that any country that offers its airfields to Ukraine for attacks on Russia may now consider itself as being involved in the war. We would like to point out that the use of the network of airfields of those countries for the staging and stationing of Ukrainian combat aviation for the further use against the Russian armed forces will be viewed as involvement of those countries in an armed conflict. See, they're playing the rule book. This was from spokesman Igor Konashenkov.
Oh, it's
The
funny.
warning
Yesterday,
follows Ukraine's efforts
Mhm.
to maintain MiG fighters from neighboring countries, including NATO allies such as Poland. Kind of sounds like a broken record, doesn't it? Every time somebody comes up with an idea to help Ukraine, the Russians pull out the playbook and go, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not in this book. You can't do that. And if you break those rules, then you're part of this war.
well, remember what Putin said yesterday. He deems anybody who's put sanctions on Russia as an act of war.
That's
So
why I'm
whether-
saying.
He's at war with the
Whether-
whole world.
That's why
Whether
I'm
we
saying.
like it or
doesn't-
not, we're already at war with
That's
Russia.
why I'm saying.
by
Doesn't
that-
all this sound like a broken record now?
Yeah, no, it
Because
does.
every single thing we do, he says we're already involved. No shit. Why is it that the American people and the people of all these countries in the UN who are outraged at what's going on in Ukraine, the people who will be conscripted to go fight that war, why are all of them ahead of the curve? Why do all the people know that we're already involved, and yet the leaders that we had elected are sticking their heads in the sands like fucking ostriches? I know why. I definitely know why. Because
They don't want to
scared.
get lynched.
Well, no, they're scared shitless. They don't want to be responsible for the global catastrophe of nuclear
balls.
war. Because then we'll turn around and blame them for that. Which, okay, CYA, right? But the fact of the matter is who are they covering for right now? Because as soon as they admit that we're in this, they're going to draft us. Well, not me because I'm too old, but they're going
I
to
think
draft.
I'm too old too.
Well, you'll just 4F because they'll just say you're too many. You eat too many Krispy Kremes.
Hey, hey,
Hey, they have standards.
didn't say it.
I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm just saying they have standards. I got rejected. Okay, I ASVAB'd and I signed up 4 times. I failed the physical the first 2 times because they said I was underweight. And then the 4th time, by the time my MOS was finally available, I 4F'd because of the arthritis in my knees and my back. So I was just like, so you wasted like 8 years of my life trying to get into this thing, and now you say I can't get into this thing, when all you had to do was like stuff me full of pasta for a couple of days. And they were like, we're not in the business of fattening up people. Right, okay. Anyway, let's move on. The broken record thing, this is going to be a recurring theme for the rest of the stories. You'll see. It's really pissing me off. So, I want to show you this individual here. Bing! Look at her hair. Doesn't she look like... Isn't that a Hillary hairdo? I'm pretty sure.
Know.
You'll see it in a second. That's a Hillary hairdo.
It's slow.
There it is. That's a Hillary hairdo. 11:35 a.m. Still haven't had lunch. It is 7:35 Ukrainian time. And the EU backtracks the fast track. European Union President. Her name is Ursula von der Leyen. Said that it is difficult to say how long the process will actually be to admit Ukraine into the EU, but that it will take due time to complete. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky officially signed an EU membership application on February 28th, 4 days into the Russian incursion into his country. 8 member states...
They're lazy.
Well, no, they're doing the same thing that we're doing. 8 member states signed a letter supporting an accelerated accession process for Ukraine, which could further speed up its integration of economic and energy systems with Europe. But von der Leyen cautioned that the process will still take time to complete. She keeps hamstringing it now.
Yep.
See, when they said we'll let you in, they were like, okay, we'll tie your economy to the EU and we will tie your country to the national grid. And Zelensky's like, cool, what about the weapons and troops? And von der Leyen is like, about that. You see, we
can't do anything.
We can't do that, you see, because no, sorry. Here's some thoughts and prayers. Maybe a couple of helmets. Yeah, here you go. That's kind of the approach she's taking. That's kind of the approach. I'm not saying we collectively, but that's the approach that Washington is taking as well. And I know Squibb is going to play this back and he's going to say we should not get involved. And I understand his reasons. I really do. I don't agree with them, but I understand them. Like, government is easy. Diplomacy is hard, I guess, is what I'm saying, right? Because your heart tells you these people need to be saved. A George S. Patton would look at Zelensky and go, I got to save that son of a bitch, right? He would say something like that. But George S. Patton doesn't exist anymore.
George S. Patton would tell President Biden to get off his ass and run laps around the White House, whether he's fucking old or not.
Maybe. We'll never know. Because George S. Patton V isn't a military man. And yes, there is a George S. Patton V.
Yes.
Let's move on.
He had a large family.
Yes, he did. Let's move on. Actually, it was the 4th son, and the 4th was 2-star general coming out of Vietnam. So,
yeah,
that guy's got his own pretty impressive record. All right, let's move on. Let's see. So after that story, 7:37 p.m. Ukrainian time, the United States and allied nations are reportedly discussing... This part's fucked. The United States and allied nations are reporting discussing the line of succession for Ukrainian's government leadership in the event that Volodymyr Zelensky, the president, is either captured or killed. The Ukrainian constitution outlines that the Speaker of Parliament succeeds the president if anything should happen to them in office. Ruslan Stefanchuk currently serves as Speaker and has been photographed with Zelensky and attended key virtual meetings with European leaders since Russia invaded on February 24th. The succession line for president beyond Stefanchuk, however, is completely unclear under their constitution. Country's parliament may need to make additional steps to validate succession measures that extend beyond just the top leaders.
Well, they got time.
I don't think they do.
No,
see,
they really don't. That was the joke.
The joke here is are we foreshadowing the abandonment of the Ukrainian government? Because parliament is not decentralized. So if Zelensky is captured or killed, first of all, they're going to hate us immediately. Second of all, even if we offer help at that point, they're going to be like, fuck off. And third of all, as soon as he's captured or killed, and his wife is captured and killed, because that's going to be a symbolic execution, sort of like Tsar Nicholas and his wife, then they will go to the parliament building and round up the entire parliament and inter them. They'll quietly die in a Siberian salt mine, but the fact of the matter is they'll take out the entire parliament in one fell swoop. The parliament will not decentralize because they can barely stay in communications with each other right now. And they do meet. We've seen the pictures, which means the line of succession will be completely irrelevant, and this stupid social exercise between us and the allied nations is a waste of time. Anyway, I'm just saying this is a waste of time. Alright, so about a minute later, another story pops up, and I will translate this for you, the sign she's holding, because it was big enough and I can actually read it. Russian authorities detained an additional 559 people at nearly 24 anti-war protests on Sunday. Now, I finally understood the recording the other day that I played of... Or no, I didn't play it. It was on YouTube Live on Friday of a protest in St. Petersburg. And a paddy wagon pulled up, and the Oman and Sober and the state police all showed up together. And there was this like PA system talking, and I couldn't make it out, but somebody sent me a better recording. And what it said was, "Respected citizens, you are taking part in an unsanctioned public event. We demand you disperse." What does that sound like to you?
Papers, please.
No, it's even worse. "You are in violation of the firearms code. Put down your weapons immediately. You have 10 seconds to comply." Ed 209. So anyway, OVD Info, an independent human rights project focused on political persecution in Russia, reported the figures Sunday after protests formed in 21 cities, including the port city of Vladivostok and the Siberian city of Irkutsk. Yeah.
Vladivostok. That city we always talk about.
Yeah.
That China.
Yeah. So the sign she's holding actually just says, "I am against the war." That doesn't say "Ni panyet," but it's close enough. "Ni panyet" is no more war. Hers says, "I'm against the war." All right. Anyway, let's move on. All right. 1:40 p.m. I had lunch. Yay! Finally, I think. Did I have lunch today? Yeah, I had lunch. Sandwich. And I captioned this "late to the party." American Express announced on Sunday that it will finally suspend all operations in Russia. The credit card company follows Visa and Mastercard in providing its own sanctions against the country following its invasion of Ukraine. Oh, shut up. No, gunmetal guy, I couldn't do that. That was modulated. I tried though. As with Visa, all cards issued by Russian banks will no longer work outside of the country. The move will apply additional pressure to the already fragile Russian economy as inflation continues to spiral upward. Okay, I watch a guy on YouTube, and his channel's the Koba 49. He's kind of an older guy. I'm pretty sure he's a veteran. He's got the tattoos, and he talks the talk. He doesn't seem artificial. And he's got nerve damage, and with his limited mobility, the guy's pretty amazing. Sometimes I don't agree with him, but I mean, you don't want yes men anyway, right? Anyway, he had this pretty unique take on what was going on, where he said every sanction and everything we do to Russia is eventually going to hurt us economically. And he went about this. By the way, he has family in Ukraine, so he's kind of got a unique perspective on this. But he was saying that pretty much every incursion and every sanction, every ban, every cancel culture thing that we've done to Russia will hurt us. Because the fact of the matter is, we are a global economy now. Globalism has crept into the world market so well. It has woven itself into all fabrics of society so well that the layman, the average person, doesn't quite realize it. Now, once upon a time, humanity got a pretty stiff lesson in made in China, right? And they started to take notice of actually how many things were made in China. And they started to understand that China was the global manufacturer of the world of cheap labor and cheap products. And because they want to keep that cheap labor and those cheap products, they keep feeding the beast that is about to go to war with Southeast Asia. And they're like, oh my God, what do? We can't stop them now. We made them multi-billionaires. We made a very few select, powerful, influential people in China super billionaires. And now we can't stop it. You should have thought about that when guys like H. Ross Perot or Donald J. Trump was trying to renegotiate NAFTA and all that kind of shit, and build things here. You pay the extra wages, you build it here. Yeah, it might cost you a few bucks more, but that's how you stay independent, right? The example he pointed out is 35% of all global barley exports comes out of Russia. We've banned exports from Russia. Beer prices are about to go through the roof. It's one of the principal ingredients of beer.
I thought that was hops.
That's another one. Wheat, barley, hops, rice, corn, those all, are ingredients towards beer. And bourbon, and scotch, and whiskey, which are all the same thing. It's just depending on what little extra things you add to it and how long you keep it in a barrel. But regardless, his point stands. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of countries that you may not politically align with, that you don't realize that somebody in the private sector is bringing into your country to keep the things that you need going. So the thing that bugs me is, yesterday I was of the opinion that Visa and Mastercards would work in Russia if your card was in Russia. Because the way that they worded it was, your card will not work to a Russian merchant, and a Russian purchaser can't buy something out of his own country. That's the way they worded it. So I made a very clear point yesterday of read between the lines. They said nothing about Russia to Russia purchases. Because they still want to make money. They're still a corporation, right? They're still in the business of making money. What American Express is saying seems to imply that the cards don't work at all. But then this story also says all cards issued by Russian banks will no longer work outside of the country. They didn't say anything about inside the country. You see? I want to know the answer to that also. Does Visa, Mastercard, and American Express still work in Russia if you live in Russia and your card is in Russia? Because then they're not really solving anything. What we may actually end up doing with all these sanctions is hardening their resolve to be domestically independent of exports, or imports, rather. The very thing we should be doing, we're forcing them to do. We locked them out of the world to force them to have their own industrial revolution, to build everything in-house, when we should be doing it in the name of national security. They're just going to end up doing it out of necessity. Anyway, let's move on. 3:40 p.m. Eastern time. So this is a story that actually comes out of Washington. I have a picture. Here you go. This guy's a rock star. This guy should just stop lying to himself and basically say, yeah, I'm not a Democrat. Senator Joe Manchin, reportedly a Democrat from West Virginia, said Sunday that he believed the option of declaring a no-fly zone above Ukraine should not be taken off the table, a move that NATO allies so far have avoided despite repeated pleas by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, due to the risk of border conflict or of a broader conflict with Russia. On Saturday, Ukrainian President Zelensky held a conference call with a bipartisan group of more than 280 congressional lawmakers, including Joe Manchin. It was surreal to have a person on the front lines, he says, basically seeing his people being slaughtered wholesale and willing to withstand all of this and fight back, and all he asks for was basically, just help me. I'll fight my own fight. Just give me the tools to do it. And for us to hesitate, or for anyone to hesitate in the free world, is wrong. And he said that. He said if Ukraine falls, Europe will fall. That came out of Joe Manchin's mouth. Does that sound like a Democrat to you in any conceivable way? Not really. What's really strange to me, listen to Kirsten Sinema these days. She doesn't sound like a Democrat either. If it wasn't for her anti-gun policies, listen to Tulsi Gabbard. She's really not a Democrat. I don't know where she comes off thinking she is. And I think she's kind of hot, but I have weird taste. Anyway,
Yes, you do.
let's move on. You know what it is? It's that little streak of hair that she has like Rogue, I think. And she looks good in a bikini on a surfboard in Hawaii. Anyway, let's move on before you start hearing about my weird tastes. Who will burden... Or we're going to go to the comment section real quick. Gunmetal Guy says, who will burden... I guess what he's saying is who will bear the burden of the bulk of enforcing a no-fly zone. This is the question that military analysts are losing sleep over for 11 days now. And what I think is going on is there are these closed-door meetings and Skype calls and Zoom meetings and stuff that we're not privy to. And I bet that if you were a fly in the room, you would hear the EU say, look, we really want to do this, but could you Yanks do it? Could you guys take the lead on this like you always do? Because, you know, these planes are really expensive and we've only got a couple of them. And if they were to get shot down by Russian planes, that would look really bad, wouldn't it? They would make the EU look weak. But if you guys were, you know, the tip of the sword and a couple of yours got shot down, but then we swiggity swoogity and saved one or two of yours, then we get to have this artificial superiority complex to keep this fraud known as the EU going. Did I just criticize that really badly just now? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the truth, isn't it? You see, here's the thing. They would say that, and a guy like Joe Manchin or an Air Force veteran like Tulsi Gabbard would say, if your planes are so shitty, don't you think you should be on the tip of the sword and find out so you can design a better plane and not have to depend on us all the time? And she would be right, wouldn't she? And then the EU is just like, well, fine, if you're not going to do it, then we just don't want to do it. Fuck Ukraine. That's kind of what they're saying, right? So who's going to bear the who's going to bear the brunt of this? I think who's going to bear the brunt of this is whoever has surface to air missiles and really good radar. That's the real solution here. If you don't want to put planes in the air, fine. You better have some SAMs on wheeled and tracked vehicles that can get in, do what they got to do, and be somewhere else before an interceptor finds them. Because that's what's going to probably be the solution. You don't want to put planes in the air, that's the only other way to do it. Or, and this is a tough one, you send out a small army of drone pilots and you do non-stop 24/7 drone strikes on every single Russian airfield you can find. Every convoy, everything. That's, you know what? That's the answer. I'm sorry. That's the answer. Some of you may have heard me say this way back in the day. We're talking years ago when I used to do Never Enough Ammos chats. But I had the solution when Trump was president. I wrote the president, Donald J. Trump, 3 times suggesting this. I got the reply and the letter and the thank you with the signed autograph picture of the President of the United States. I've got one of those from every president since Ronald Reagan. I got 3 from Trump because I wrote the same thing 3 times. And I said, I will keep banging this drum until you address it. And my solution was, you can build a wall on the southern border, but it does you no good if you have no presence on that wall, because people will simply just climb over it or tunnel under it. So I said, why don't you make the wall a livable space, like the Great Wall of China was? And every 40 or 50 miles between sections of the wall in these livable spaces, you put in QRF teams. And what you do is you take the defense budget and you focus a good chunk of it on creating a giant air force of drones on the southern border. You give the MOS 100,000 new drone people, pilots and mechanics and technicians. So what you do is you live at the wall, you're stationed at the wall, and you give it like a station number. So it's like, I'm at W1, and then, 50 miles away, it's like I'm at W2 or whatever. And you have QRFs in wheeled vehicles, and you have hundreds of thousands of staff working 100,000 drones. And they're just constantly circling overhead. So they get really good practice at friend or foe identification, how to use FLIR and night vision and all this stuff, protecting your southern border. So these guys are, combat seasoned veterans by then. And if they see something, then they relay the information with the GPS. The QRF at the nearest post goes and chases it down, and those people are apprehended before they can disappear into the night, right? I came up with that idea for the immigration policies. Imagine if we did it and we had 100,000 troops that can fly and maintain a force of 50,000 drones all at once. You basically created strategic air command with drones, and you take half your force at the border and you deploy them into Poland with all their gear and all their drones. And the burden of the no-fly zone would be enforced by armed drones. But the armed drones don't have to dogfight the planes, because you would just preemptively strike all the airfields that these Russian planes take off from if they're taking off in Ukrainian airspace. If they used an airfield in the Ukraine to take off from, you level it. So what you do is the bulk is drones. And if the Russians catch the drone and missile it, then you send actual jets to take out the Russian. So that's how you do it. NATO jets intercept the Russian. American drones maintain the no-fly zone. That's how you do it. That's the answer. But remember, the second you do that, we're involved. Fully involved. We're already involved. The whole world is. They just don't want to admit it. Okay. Moving on. I didn't... This was supposed to be an hour. It's going to be 2. Jesus. Anyway. At the risk of brown-nosing, that wall drone idea is the most logical word spoken since the political war invasion cripple all started. Well, I appreciate that, but I had a lot of time to think of it, and the cost would be high, yes. But remember, a sovereign nation is defined by having a well-defined, respected, and defended border. If you can't define your border and have it respected by your neighbor, then you're not a sovereign nation because they don't take you seriously. And that's the only solution. And it's unfortunate because you don't ever hear about immigration problems out of Canada, do you? They don't come running down here. I mean, they're us with free healthcare, right? But they have stifling gun control too. Anyway, I appreciate you saying that. It's just I've been told by many people that I'm in the wrong line of work, and I just got to find the right person to get in front of that's going to say you need to tell this guy, and that guy's a politician who's actually going to get it done. But I haven't met that person yet, so I'm just an ideas guy. All right, let's go on. I'm already burning 90 minutes of your time. I really thought we'd be done half an hour ago. So it's about to get worse, obviously. 1:48 a.m. Monday, Ukrainian time. So it's 5:48. I'm thinking dinner, right? Netflix has suspended its service in Russia following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Broken record. Always. Following the country's invasion of Ukraine. That's like just a line now. It comes out like the race card, almost. Given the circumstances on the ground, we have decided to suspend our service in Russia. That's corporate wah 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 wah. We're doing it because everyone else is doing it and it's trendy and popular. The move comes after the streaming service, which first launched in the country in 2016, previously paused all future projects and acquisitions from Russia. Variety magazine reported that Netflix had 4 originals in the works, one of which was filming, but now has been put on hold. 4 originals, 1 filming. I think that was Epidemia, To the Lake. If you haven't seen the first season of that, it's brilliant. But now we'll never see the rest of it. What a shame. Because Putin's a dick. Alright, let's move on. A minute later, 1:40 a.m. Moscow. And I have a picture for you. Do I have a picture for you? No, I don't have a picture for you. But here comes the hypocrisy thing that we were talking about earlier in the show. Russia is recruiting Syrians experienced in urban combat to help with its invasion of Ukraine. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, strangely enough, Russia has had troops in Syria since 2015 in support of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, the guy with the really goofy-looking bulldog cheeks. An American assessment claims that Russia is now looking to recruit the fighters from the country who gained experience and expertise in urban combat to help in the fight to take the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv in their ongoing invasion of the country. So let me get this straight. Ukraine is not allowed to get any outside military assistance in terms of boots on the ground or planes in the air. But Russia can call you out and tell you that if you do, you're an enemy to Russia. At the same time, they have brought in, I think it's 100 squads. They're basically stormtroops, right? Special forces, like they're assassin squads from Chechnya and infantry from Belarus and now Syria. So now it's one country, Ukraine, versus Russia, Chechnya, Belarus, and Syria. And that's okay? Like, hello NATO, hello EU. They keep adding to their roster. And you're doing nothing about it. Here's the worst part. These extra countries have not been getting the same level of stifling sanctions and cancellations of credit card services and SWIFT banking. Like, how is that not happening? Every time Russia says you can't go in there, and then he adds this other country, that country should have every single penalty and sanction and everything that Russia's getting. Or if you really wanted to hurt Russia, and you don't want to attack Russia directly, Chechnya, Belarus, and Syria are not nuclear powers. So start bombing them. Bomb all Russia's allies. Attack all Russia's allies. Take away all their command and control and their ability to fight immediately. Because two things will happen. Well, two things will happen. You wipe out their command and control. You wipe out their military before they can send them across to Ukraine to work for Russia. And you have just created a civil war power vacuum in those three countries too. Because what's happening in Syria? Revolutionary war. If you take out Bashar al-Assad's military that was about to be conscripted to go work for the Russians, now he can't defend his country against what he called terrorists, even though they're trying to get rid of him, who is a terrorist, right? You create the power vacuum to ouster a dick who chose the wrong side, right? That's how you get rid of him. Same thing for Chechnya. Same thing for Belarus. Fine. You don't want to attack Russia? Don't. Attack all its allies. You think Russia's going to stop what they're doing and defend Syria? Are you fucking kidding me? You think they're going to do shit about Syria? They're like, I don't have time to play in that sandbox. That's the kind of guy Putin is. I don't have time to play in that sandbox. There ain't nothing in there I need anyway. I don't technically need anything from Chechnya. Belarus, it was cool. It was fun while it lasted, but sorry, bro. We'll come get you in like 15 years after we administer Ukraine. If we survive long enough to do it, and if our holy leader Putin doesn't die. Just a thought.
Or Biden doesn't shit himself again.
Just a thought.
Well, speaking of Belarus,
yes.
They're let me go back to it really quick here. They're
I'm really glad you and Mike are doing this like off-screen, like finding updates and facts and stuff like that. I love that because
the deputy Belarus deputy minister quits over Ukraine war.
Yeah, because he knows he's gonna get
Major General Viktor Gulbovich.
He knows the government's
screwed. Yeah, he knows they're screwed.
Well, that's awesome. That means there's still moral people left.
General staff. So he's like the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Basically.
Yeah, it'll slow things down a little bit, but he's replaceable eventually.
What they aren't telling you is there are mass protests, just as many as there are in Russia, in Belarus right now, and they're doing the same thing that Oman is doing in Russia.
Belarus that are training to go help fight with the Ukrainians.
Yep, you guys are spot on.
So,
all right,
because Belarus didn't want the Russians there either. They just couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, because the government's a puppet installed government like Ukraine had, and I think they were on the verge of doing exactly what Ukraine did in 2014.
voting them out.
Yep. Well,
No,
ousting the
throwing
puppets,
them out.
throwing them out. Yeah. So I mean, that was a country that could have went either way. You know what's really funny? Fun story here. Wargaming, World of Tanks, Warships, World of Warplane, all them.
They're broke.
They must have saw the writing on the wall. They left Belarus years ago. They built a multi-billion-dollar facility on the island of Cyprus. They left. Probably because they knew. They were like, you know what? We've got a really good thing going, and we don't want to lose it to some geopolitical bullshit, so we're out. Really, their headquarters is stunning. It's like modern art, the building.
No, what it is they like money.
Of course they like money. I drank with the guy who ran the company. I got selfies with that guy.
I got a friend who works for Wargaming.
Strangely enough, his name is Serb-E, his username. But yeah, no, I mean, there was a time where like I was doing the gatherings and the socials with him and the chieftain and pretty much all the guys you saw on the YouTube channel for years. But anyway, let's go on. About a minute later, it's 5:50 my time, so I'm thinking about dinner, I think. NATO members have a green light, quotes, to send fighter jets as part of their military aid to support Ukraine against the Russian invasion. So says U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. In fact, we're working with our Polish friends right now about what we might be able to do to backfill their needs. I swear to God, these people are listening to these podcasts. They're using all my words. They might be able to backfill their needs as if in fact they choose to provide the fighter jets to the Ukrainians. That's why I used that picture, and that was the first story of the day. It took Blinken the whole day to make a public statement on something that I knew at 12:45 in the morning this morning. But whatever. He has to sleep too, right? The guy's working so hard doing absolutely nothing and wearing a mask like an idiot. But yeah, they have a green light because we said so. Final story.
One's the first one to do it?
Yeah. Final story from me, and then I think you guys wanted to add something on the end of this, so you're more than welcome to. But the final story from me, I'm gonna be. I saw this and I got so patriotic. I was almost moved to tears when I saw these flags flying gloriously in the sky today. So here it is. Sorry, I had to. It's a joke. 8:29 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Good old Washington, D.C. This is about the this is about the Dow Futures Market. Oil prices have surged to a 13-year high Sunday as U.S. officials have signaled an openness to a ban on Russian oil imports amid Putin's invasion of Ukraine. West Texas Intermediate crude, the U.S. benchmark, has risen 9.5% today to $126.64 a barrel as of 7 p.m. Sunday evening.
Sean, I see the picture now. I have to press the button.
Go ahead.
Let's go, Brandon. I agree.
There you go.
There we go.
Brent crude, the international benchmark, shot up 12% to $130.98 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate hit an all-time high of $147.27, and Brent hit $147.50 in July 2008. You remember that story I talked about maybe about 40 minutes ago about oil prices in the speculator market and how it went up to $150 a barrel? Welcome to 2008. Can I have all my years back too? Like, let's see. That would make me... That would make me 28 years old again. Can we go back to 2008? Is that too much to ask?
I wouldn't mind. I'd be younger too.
I'd so be happy. My liver was in better shape back then, and I didn't get hangovers like I do now. I'm turning into Arthur from Dudley Moore into Arthur from Arthur on the Rocks or whatever.
Oh, you certainly drink like him.
I wasn't as fat either.
Well, That's all I'm saying. That's all I've got for you guys. You two had something you wanted to add on to this, right? From the beginning of the show?
Scott did.
So just kind of hold
Oh,
off for this one?
I kind of got mine in.
Oh, that was the one. Okay, so you got that one in earlier. That's fine. That's cool. Like, we're actually going to do it if you don't have an add-on.
Speaking of the Israelis,
Go ahead.
there is a Israeli special force group that arrived. Now, I'm assuming
That's the
that
one
they
that we're
came
waiting
on
for.
their own. But Israeli special forces, which branch of them, obviously. But there's enough veterans there that, yeah, I wouldn't want to be the Russians right now. I'm sure they brought some nice, nasty toys with them, too. Even if they don't have a government approval.
All right, so I guess the only other thing I've got in the latest news is Blofeld news. Elon Musk said said like 10 minutes ago, Europe must reboot all of its nuclear power stations for the sake of national and international security. Hopefully, it is now extremely obvious that Europe should restart dormant nuclear power stations and increase power output of existing ones. This is critical to national and international security. I want to piggyback off of this for just a second while it's still fresh in my mind. Lindsey Graham, your senator, right? He is an extremely positive proponent of nuclear energy. Now, if done correctly, it is clean energy in terms of what comes out of the cooling towers, right? Steam. Yes, you have nuclear waste from the reactors that has to be stored or dealt with. But we have humanity has a way of finding uses for things when they think they're used up, recycling, right? And reactor technology has sort of gone obsolete because for some reason everybody started going, no, we shouldn't do that. But if you took like Fallout lore, for instance, right? The game Fallout is supposed to be an alternate point in history in the world where instead of being shying away from the power of the atom, the world embraced it in Fallout. So the nuclear power thing it spread like wildfire. Everybody used nuclear energy. And because of that, the development for it got better. They figured out how to make it smaller or more efficient or cleaner or less toxic. Things like that, right? They embraced the atom. And what Elon Musk is saying and what Lindsey Graham supports, and frankly what I completely am behind, is it's the greenest New Deal you can get that will not destroy your national economy.
Or your piggy bank.
Or your piggy bank. It's cheap to produce a lot of it energy-wise, right? You can do like Gizzard Gary. You can put the plants in flyover states or just places that aren't very used. Or if you were really worried about meltdowns and stuff, right? Why don't you build a nuclear power plant like you built Cheyenne Mountain Complex and put it in a mountain? So the only
they got enough of them in Europe.
So the only thing that comes out of the top of the mountain is the steam from the cooling tower. And should the plant melt down, you can just collapse the mountain on top of it and seal it. Like, how am I thinking about these things and nobody else has thought of these things in the national interest, right? Like, I don't know, build it 1,000 feet underground. Build it in used up coal mines that have no more coal. And you can use the space that you dug out and build it in there if you had to, right? There are ways to do this, and the world doesn't do it because we're led by idiots.
Well, has anybody figured out how to tap into Yellowstone and turn that into a giant
geothermal plant?
Geothermal plant?
The world won't do it. You're right, though. That would be easy. I mean, basically what you do is you grab a C-130 and you kidnap a bunch of Icelandics and you bring them over there and say, do your magic on this one. Whatever Scandinavian magic you did over there, do it here. You know, Iceland is completely run by geothermal.
Mm-hmm.
The whole country.
Yep.
Every house is heated. Every power plant or everything that runs on power is available. I think it's probably one of the cheapest countries to live in terms of energy consumption. Now, granted, it's on a giant volcano, and one day it could explode and the whole island will disappear. But whatever. Details.
Details.
Yellowstone.
Details, right? So anyway,
super volcano.
No, I'm with you on the whole geothermal thing, though. Absolutely, 100%. Like, the Green New Deal people are idiots. Okay, they're not doing the green things that we have just discussed. They're not doing that. They're doing things that require you mining lithium in horrible conditions in third world countries and killing a bunch of people in the name of clean green energy. They're making you buy solar panels out of China wholesale to keep that war machine funded because they're invested in these companies. That's how politicians get rich. That's why they belong on the end of a rope. That's why I want to be the next John C. Woods should they ever take that stance and start putting these people away, figuratively speaking. If you don't know who John C. Woods is, look it up on Google. Read the Wikipedia article. I promise you that man was an American hero. He's not a criminal. He's not a criminal. He was a military guy. He's an American hero. He's a national treasure, and he died way too soon. And with that, I'm going to play this. Because I promised you we weren't going to do this for 2 hours. So we're going to do it for 1 hour and 47 minutes of your Sunday. I appreciate the fact that you all sat down and spent your Sundays with me. I'm very grateful to my panelists for continuing to put up with this project. And we will keep doing this until this conflict is over or we're all at war. Here. Anyway, if you're new to my channel, welcome. And if you're a regular here, welcome back. All I can do is encourage you to hit the like buttons and maybe tell people that we do this and that we can grow the audience. So, with that being said, this was the War Room, Day 11, and we'll see you tomorrow for Day 12 with hopefully better news. Later, y'all.
Don't count.
Mm-hmm.